Hi, hey, hello, what's going on? You're watching Gnarly Marmalade Media, and today we've got a very special interview with Mr. David Siev. How's it going, David?
I'm doing great, Luke. Thank you for having me.
No problem. It's lovely to have you here. I've actually just got off watching my second time with Bad Axe, about 20 minutes ago.
Oh
So
my
it's
gosh,
very fresh in my
wow.
brain. And I love it. It's coming out very soon. And yeah, I mean, so I wanted to start off with a chat about food because I think there's a lot to say about it in the film. What sort of food does Rachel serve?
The food that Rachel serves, for me, I describe it as like it is like very much like American cuisines, but there's definitely a lot of dishes that have that Asian fusion in it. My
Hmm.
dad being Cambodian, it adds this extra flair to, some of like the more traditional dishes, like our steaks, for instance, right? Like it's
Oh
a
my
steak
God,
dinner,
the
but
steaks in there look
it's
amazing.
what it's marinated in and how he seasons it, right? It's very much using a lot of traditional like Cambodian sauces and spices. So it's American food, but it has that blend of a fusion into it.
And what's your order when you're going there? What you like on the menu? What's your favorite?
Gosh, what I love on the menu, I think my favorite is probably our grilled Atlantic salmon. It's in this coconut sauce that it's my dad's recipe, and it's just amazing. Again, it's broiled salmon, but when he brings his
Hmm.
own flavors into it, it becomes something so unique and so different that I think a lot of people, especially in the community of Bad Axe, has never really tasted, something like that before. So yeah,
Mm.
the salmon is one of my favorites. I love our rice bowls. We have like a pork belly bowl. Again, it's marinated in the special sauce. It's over rice and veggies. That's incredible. And then also the barbecue ribs.
Oh,
I
can't go wrong.
Yeah, you can't go wrong with barbecue ribs with some French fries and Brussels sprouts. So
So, are you much of a cook yourself? Have you ever worked in the restaurant with the family? Or I assume you did growing up, maybe.
yes, growing up, my siblings and us, we all grew up working in the restaurant. For myself, I didn't do the whole lot of cooking like in the kitchen on the line. I would cook for myself, and in those cases, I'd make the easy stuff like a
Yeah.
cheeseburger or fish and chips or stuff like that. But when it came to cooking during a dinner rush hour, they sent me to do the dishes. I was the one. I
Right.
was a bus boy clearing off tables and doing dishes. But
Hmm.
as you see in the film, it was really Jacqueline, my oldest sister. She's the one that grew up cooking in that kitchen, and she still does to this day.
And well, what's the age difference between you guys? Oh,
4 years. 4 years. Yep.
okay. Not too much. Wicked. So with the documentary, at what point in your life did you kind of realize there's the story there, or is it kind of when it's coming into the Trump administration, coming into COVID? Is that when you like kind of first saw the kind of opportunity there? Obviously, you've done the short film before about your kind of family's history with the killing fields. But yeah, when did it kind of develop into more of a personal, in the moment story?
Yeah, it's interesting because when the film Bad Axe, I never thought in the process of shooting it, at least the early days, that I was even making a documentary. I always knew even before, the COVID-19 pandemic and everything, that I wanted to share my family's story. Because when I look at, what my parents were able to accomplish, my mom, she's a Mexican American woman. My dad, he's a Cambodian refugee who just came here with the shirt on his back in 1979. And, the two of them decide of all places to settle in this town called Bad Axe, Michigan. And they decide to open up a donut shop, and it doesn't succeed at that. And then they turn into an ice cream shop, but that doesn't work. Eventually it becomes a restaurant, and it struggles for years to keep the doors open. But through working together as a family, for almost 2 decades, we were able to, turn it around and make it, not only the successful business it is today, but like so much of what the center of the community of Bad Axe is. So that story in itself was one I always wanted to share.
As you
Um,
lived it.
Right, and that's and I lived through it. I felt like my family story is like the American dream story. But when I picked up the camera, when I moved back home from New York City and started filming my family, um, it wasn't the intention that all of this was going to be a documentary. I've always loved filming and photographing my family. And with COVID, I knew it was a very important time in history, and these were memories I just wanted to bottle up. Um, but I came to the realization, and I think it was around the Black Lives Matter movement, after we shot this protest scene, um, this light bulb sort of went off where I realized that this American dream story I always wanted to share was still unfolding itself in front of me in my very eyes, of as far as what everything was happening in 2020, with the COVID pandemic, with the racial reckoning our country was going through, the political divide, right? It was all of these things that were challenging this American dream that we worked so hard to build together. And it just made sense that no, that the story was already coming to life. The story I always wanted to share. It had to be this documentary, and it had to be told during this time.
That's really interesting because I was going to ask about kind of how your log line sort of developed from the start and kind of obviously at the end
Yeah,
because you're living the experience. But
right.
actually, I guess
Well,
if
you're
there wasn't one, it's like,
Well,
yeah,
that's what it was, right? Like we were all just living life, and I was just doing what I always loved doing, and that was just, bottling my family and memories and videos and photos, and then long behold, that this desire of mine to always want to share their story, it was everything I was capturing right in front of me.
And well, what was your filming setup like? Was it just you and a camera? Did you have any? I saw your girlfriend was in some very small bits where she's interviewing you. Was it just you guys
She's
and
my
a
wife
couple
now.
cameras? What? Oh yeah,
Yeah, it was,
oh my gosh,
yeah,
how's that? Wait, is the wedding happen now?
it did. It happened this past May. It's been a
Oh,
very busy year. So
congratulations, man.
thank you. But no, the filming style was, look, it was very much, it was one camera. It was just me and a camera. I shot on this little camera called the Blackmagic Pocket, which is a very small cinema camera. And so, that's why, the film at times, some of it can feel like this aesthetic of a home video, but that's because
Mm,
that's what I was doing. I always loved filming my family. So that was very much the style. And some of it's with iPhone, because that's what the only camera I had available
mhm.
during some of those certain moments, especially you see the people come in with the mask in the restaurant. The footage doesn't look as beautiful as the rest, but that's
Yeah,
because all I had was my iPhone on me. So
and
it
you had
was
to get
really,
that.
yeah, it was really just a one camera setup, one camera, microphone, and that was it.
I mean, so how do you find being the kind of the man behind the camera and like the sound and the kind of interviewing and kind of that decisive moment of when you kind of flick the lens on, get it going? How do you kind of bring that all together and decide when you're going to film? Or because I mean, there's a lot of very kind of situational things that you like. Obviously, there's no staging in the whole film. You've just turned it on at the right times, caught the right
Yeah.
content, and then it's strung together perfectly. And you've got so many through lines and subplots through the documentary. How do you do that in the moment when you're filming?
I mean, in the moment, like I said, before the Black Lives Matter movement, I was just filming all the time, and I was filming everything. Like 8 hours a day, I was filming my family, and again, not knowing that I was going to even make a documentary out of this. I think once the wheels began to spin, and I realized I was making a documentary, I began to develop more of that filmmaker instinct of
Mm,
like, okay, like I think these moments are more important, uh and I need to make sure the camera is on um for these important interviews, and making sure I'm asking the right questions. So, and I think that's what, at least throughout the film, it lends itself to so much nuance, right? It's just, you're really just seeing my family through my lens, and um and that nuance to me is like what makes the film so intimate and so raw, of being just that single camera that is there in that room. Because you have to remember that, like, from my family's point of view, um when I'm filming them, to them it doesn't feel like there's a filmmaker there.
Mm.
they're used to this. They've always been used to me filming. To them, it's just like, it feels like the little brother that's filming, just doing what he does, or like, that's David, our son. Like that's what he always loves to do.
Yeah.
He loves to film. So, I think that's being able to have that access, as a director, right? And then being with my family, that access is so important because that is what lends the film just being so raw and so intimate and, again, so nuanced.
I mean, I think that's a really interesting thing in kind of cinematic truth in documentary, that there maybe the camera will influence the subject and all of this, but actually, if your family's kind of conditioned to you just filming everything, it's film. David's got the camera on again. Actually, there's so much less influence. I mean, I think some of the scenes that struck me the most are when there's kind of debates and arguments going on in the family, and you're kind of
Sure.
there not having input in it because you're literally just viewing, and but seems so like just natural and no. I mean, I think a lot of people would be kind of shying away from the camera in that, but I guess it's so kind of ingrained in their
So
life there. I
used,
mean,
they're just so,
yeah.
yeah, so conditioned to it, where they never notice the camera. And for me, those moments were a bit tricky because now I'm wearing my filmmaker hat and nodding and interjecting myself in some of these conversations that I normally would be. And that's
Mm,
because it's like, well, I just want that, I just want that objective truth, to be captured for what it is. But then it's like, well, in these moments, like if I didn't have the camera, I would usually find myself being part of these conversations. And you do see more of that as the film progresses,
mm,
where that realization that that voice behind the camera, my voice, does become important to include in the film. And thankfully, like, my wife did set me down in those early days of the pandemic and interview me and ask me why I was even
mm.
doing all of this. And that layer becomes peeled back more and more, especially once we put the trailer out there and my family begins to question whether or not I should do this, right? That self-interrogation becomes really important throughout the film.
I find it really interesting that, I mean, I think it must have been about 20 minutes in when we first get your voice,
Yeah.
because it's
Mhm.
the first sit down interview with you. But before that, it's entirely setting up who everyone is in the family, their relationships, and not even necessarily their relationship to you. Obviously, you've got the on-screen titles of this my dad, this my mum,
Yeah.
but
Mhm.
it's much more about the kind of hierarchy and how everyone kind of fits in. And it's like one by one, and it's done so nicely because it's not about you, it is about the family. And
Exactly.
but then when you come in, it actually adds that, bringing in the presence of the filmmaker there, it does add something. I think it gives an understanding that you have always been there with the camera, and that there is more truth to what's going on, and you're not kind of interrupting anything. It's not just some random crew, it's you with the camera. And yeah, it's this really lovely way of doing it.
Yeah. No, no, I'm sorry. I'm so glad you said that, though, because that was a process to get to. But no, that's exactly like having myself included in the film. It had to come in at the right time because it is not just my story at all. I never wanted this film to be like, oh, this is me telling my story. It's like, no, this is our family's story.
Mm. I mean, how did you find those kind of more conflictive moments when you're behind the camera? I mean, I think one stands to mind where your sister's telling your dad, oh, you should be staying at home through COVID. It's quite dangerous for you to come out to the shop. Like, how do you, I mean, was that something you're weighing in on behind the scenes? Because I imagine you have an opinion on it,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
it's
I that
yeah.
was that was definitely something I was weighing in behind the scenes, and that was more so. I agreed with Jacqueline. My
Hmm.
parents, their health and their safety was so important for me. And again, like when I started filming, like I didn't feel the need to interject, and I didn't, especially when I began editing, didn't feel that it needed my point of view in those scenes because the lens is my point of view, right?
Mm,
That is what you're seeing unfold on screen. um and the reason why I include that is because my point of view is actually that of Jacqueline's, where so many young adults, they wanted their parents to be safe, and I was no exception, and obviously Jacqueline wasn't
hmm.
either. So
I'm exactly the same, man. I mean, it was such a weird conversation
yeah.
to have, like telling my grandparents, like, just stay put for a bit, and they
Mhm.
don't want to, and all of this going on. I mean, what age did you move away from Bad Axe? You were living in New York for a bit, am I right? Or...
Yeah, so I was I lived in Bad Axe all the way throughout high school and would always come home during college. And it was in 2015 when I graduated from film school at the University of Michigan. I moved out to Los Angeles to really begin, you know, start my career as a filmmaker. So moving away from Bad Axe, it just was, because it didn't have the opportunities. It couldn't provide those opportunities that I needed for my career. So that's why I lived in LA. I ended up moving to New York in 2019. Pandemic happens, had to move back home. So
Mhm. And then, so throughout the pandemic, you were living back in Bad Axe with the family.
yeah, yep. I'm living in Bad Axe. My wife and I, we packed up and we left like I want to say it was a few days before the country shut down. Um,
Wow.
yep, we left New York City. We had just signed a lease on an apartment. This was like our first apartment. We were living together in New York. And I don't know if you remember, but things happened so quickly. Like it
Insane.
seemed like it was like 1 week we were fine. Like we were on a cruise ship, we signed a lease on an apartment, and then next it's like, oh no, this is some really serious stuff. And yeah, we ended up moving back to Bad Axe, lived there, pretty much the whole entire year. um which was a bummer because we still had to pay rent on that New York
Hmm.
apartment. But it
Horrible.
was, yeah, it was so terrible, and I know we weren't the only people in those positions.
No, yeah, I'm countrywide, I can imagine. I mean, Bad Axe is a very weird name for a town, and I didn't know it existed. And so when I saw the documentary name, I wasn't kind of, it didn't like, yeah, I had no idea what it's about. And then I read the synopsis, and it made sense because of the town. But do you know what the origin story is of Bad Axe, the name?
Yes, I do, and I promise it's not as interesting as it might sound, and
Really?
that was the reason why we decided not to include it in the film, because I figured if
Hmm.
people want to know, they can look it up. But
Yeah.
basically, in this area of Michigan, there was a great fire that happened in the 1800s, and then when the land was re-inhabited again by these two settlers. The only thing that they found in this area of land was a broken axe, a broken hatchet, and they called it Camp Bad Axe. So that's,
Wow. And then it expanded from there.
yep, exactly. So
I mean, and how big is Bad Axe? Do you know what the population is, or just general kind of
it's
size?
it's about less than 3,000 people.
Wow.
The diversity, there's not too much. It's like
Hmm.
97% white. Um, and mainly a very conservative community. Um, but again, it's also a community where everyone knows everyone. It's like Mike says, my
Hmm.
brother-in-law says as well. Everyone knows everyone, and there is that sense of real community.
I mean, I'm from a village myself, so it's kind of it's quite relatable watching your film, even though
Sure, yeah.
obviously it's a very different environment to what I'm used to. But yeah, that's beautiful. Something that I really shocked me, like I was saying before we started recording, was the kind of pairing with your short film, Year Zero, and just how that kind of feeds in towards the start and generally, yeah, I mean, I guess it's giving context to your dad's history and bringing it through. Can you talk to me about how you ended up making that decision to kind of involve that footage and kind of I guess it's quite meta using both as the filmmaker using your previous work. I find it hard to describe. Yeah, I mean, talk to me about it.
No, no, no. It was something we went back and forth on in the editing room, and for me, so much about this film Bad Axe is a story of our family, but it's also the story of two generations coming to a head and learning to accept each other's differences, but be able to thrive and cohabitate with each other. You see that between the relationship between Jacqueline and my dad. But what's important when describing that conflict is really peeling back the layers as to why each of these individuals think the way they think, what makes them who they are. And for my dad, so much of that is the story of him surviving the Cambodian genocide, the killing fields. So that became, I can't talk about my family's history and our story without talking about where we came from, and that's Cambodia. So when describing his journey and his backstory of being a refugee and being a survivor of genocide, there's not a whole lot of visual footage that exists during that time. The archive that's included in the film, there's not much more, believe it or not, beyond that of the killing fields and the Khmer Rouge.
Wow.
So that's why I had to fall back on my previous work, not because I wanted to show off my previous work in any way, but because I felt like this was the best way to visually depict my dad's story of him being a 16-year-old boy trying to survive the killing fields and the genocide. So it really became, circumstantial to include that footage. And it's also great, because it's my footage. I'm able to use that and include it in my documentary. And the good thing is, like someone like yourself who said you wanted to watch the Year Zero before watching Bad Axe, it's great because hopefully after watching Bad Axe, people want to go and learn more about Cambodia and the killing fields. And they can do that from watching my films and the other films that exist out there about the Cambodian genocide.
I mean, yeah, I actually was not aware of, well, not aware of much around the Cambodian genocide. It's not something that gets taught in schools here
No, it's
at all.
not.
Um, so I mean, watching that was just incredibly opening, and I watched them literally back to back. So
I
going
love
straight
that.
into it, it felt very kind of, it made it very personal, I think, and it really obviously came from, I mean, obviously it's real experience, and it's just it made both of them. It added a lot of dimensions, and I love the mix of kind of the stage like reenactments, and then the non-fiction filmmaking in there. I thought it was really beautiful, and it made it hit another emotional note for me. Um, I've got I thought it was interesting. Have you heard of desktop documentary? It's like a new style of documentary that's coming out at the moment. Where I mean, is it so the part of your documentary where it's going through the crowdfunding and showing kind of the
Mhm.
impact and the comments, and it's all based
Yeah.
in the desktop window. And what made you choose to do that? Because it's quite a window out of the documentary, but it also adds such a new stage to your documentary there. It's like another act when that comes in.
For me, in storytelling in general, it's just so much about showing than telling. I could have easily, I guess, put a camera on Jacqueline and she could have spoke about the social media comments and told, what was happening as a result of the trailer. Certainly, but would have been a way to do that. But the way I decided to do it, within the desktop, it felt like, an effective way of really showing this, where it didn't really need too much explanation. Because,
Mm.
when you're editing and making a film, you, there's certain scenes that can drag and they can take a while to get a point across. Whereas with this, it's like a minute
It's
scene where
all you need to know.
it just works. It was just a style that worked, and that's why we decided to, I decided to go with it. Yeah.
I mean, I think it helped with the scale of the situation as well, because you see so many strangers saying these things. And
Mhm.
when, as soon as you land on Facebook, you understand that it's kind of could be international. These guys could be from
Exactly.
England, it could be anywhere, like halfway across the world, and sending these hate messages. And I think it's just a really, really cool decision there. I really love that.
Thank you. I appreciate
Um,
that.
Another thing that really struck me was the relationship between the documentary being made, its impact on your family, and then the activism that your family wants is promoting, and how the documentary sort of embodies that, because their experience and then their experience through the impact on themselves shown through the documentary is then a form of activism. And I just wondered
Yeah.
what your take is on the kind of balance between impact on your family, because obviously they have received a lot of hate mail and horrible phone calls
Sure.
and all sorts of other terrible things. But then this documentary says so much, and I haven't seen a documentary kind of set during this period in COVID, kind of looking at like in the BLM period, looking at things in kind of a small town way, especially like focusing on the Trump administration and maybe that's effect on on the general population. Yeah, can you speak about the kind of balance there
Sure.
between activism and impact?
No, that responding to that call of activism becomes so important in the film. Like I mentioned, like that's when the wheels began to turn for me after the Black Lives Matter movement. That I think I might be making a documentary this entire time. And there's that point in the film where my mom turns to me after we get the threatening phone call, and she says, "You don't live here, David. You don't know what it's like." And you know that's some hard truth right there because she's
Mm,
100% correct. At the end of all of this, I get to go back to New York, and my family, they have to put up with the consequences of it. And during this time when I was, in the early days of editing the film, my family knew how much frustration um, I was bringing to the story in those early edits. Um, I was in a very angry place. I wasn't happy with what was going on with our country, and I wanted this film to be my voice of activism, but I can admit I was doing that in the wrong way. Um, those early edits very much had sound bites and news footage that really just unfocused it from the family story, and it became more about me wanting to say this bigger message about
mm.
our country. And I think had I continued down that road, the film would become, it would become so much from a much more angrier place that I think would have resulted in me getting on my soapbox and preaching to my own echo chambers about
Hmm.
everything that was wrong in our country. And that worried my family. They knew that if I continued on that path, I would be making a film that would shut off half of the United States. So through a lot of hard conversations, and you see the point where my dad says I need to rewrite this love letter
Mm.
because he's so correct. He is right about that. And throughout the process of editing and keeping my family involved, the question they left me with was, why are you even doing this? And I had to really sit and think about that in the edit. And the answer was simple, and that was I always wanted to share my family's story. And that was all motivated by love. That's the reason why I want to share this story, because I have so much appreciation and love for the resilience and everything we've been through together. So I went back in the editing room, and I brought that energy and this message of love into everything I was doing, where the film, now after it's been through, so much of a personal process of myself, it very much does reflect feelings of love, and it is about my family story, but it also is about activism too, but not in a way where we're telling you, how to feel or how to think. We're just showing you um, how we feel and how we think through our experience of being in Bad Axe, Michigan. And I'm so glad like that was the realization I was able to come to with the help of everyone, because now that when we show this film, even to some skeptical individuals, they might not agree with us at the end of the day, but at least it's creating dialogue and an
Mm.
understanding of our experience and why we felt the need to respond to that call to activism. It's almost like uh the film was able to do everything I wanted it to do, but now it's just doing it through a much more personal lens that is able to start like healthy dialogue and conversations.
I think it really does help it become more talkative because of how personal it is. And if it was your kind of perspective of the country and all of these people, I think
I would
yeah,
be
you
pointing
would
my
lose
finger
that.
and yelling at people, and like, what
Mm.
good does that do, right?
And no one wants
Instead,
to hear that.
no one wants to hear that. Instead, you're seeing this family and you see them as the imperfect individuals that they are, and going through something we all went through together. So I think in that sense, it really humanizes a lot of these issues, and people can see themselves. It doesn't matter on what side of the spectrum, political spectrum are on, right? They find a way to see themselves and their own experiences in our family. And I think that's what's important. And that's why people are willing to start to have a conversation.
Mm. I mean, I think what also really struck me was the kind of visibility for the Asian American experience during COVID, and
Yeah.
kind of especially during BLM. I haven't seen enough and anywhere near enough coverage of it because I mean, hate crime went up massively, like statistically. So, I mean, can you talk about how maybe that was embodied in the film at all?
No, absolutely. Like, when I was editing, it was at a time when all of this AAPI hate was coming out. And again, I wanted to like make a message about that. But the more I tried to do that, the less focus there was on the family story. And I remember talking with like a couple of my mentors. They're like, you don't need to try to do that. Like what your family is going through is part of the AAPI hate that's going on in our country. Just show your experience. Just share your
Mm,
story. Because that's gonna translate to this larger message you want to say. So that's what I did, like it's really just focusing on, okay, how did our family respond to the AAPI hate that was going on in our country? What was our experience like being in Bad Axe, Michigan? So I think telling it through that personal lens was the most effective way of speaking out about AAPI hate.
perfect. I mean, and have you been able to tour it at some film festivals this year yet, or like where's
We
it been shown so far?
We have been. So we did our world premiere at South by Southwest in Austin,
Awesome.
Texas, which was incredible. We won the audience award and the special jury prize there. And thank you. And since then, I think we've been over 30 festivals or something like that across
Wow.
the United States. Um, I was reading Deadline, and I think they said we're one of the most awarded documentaries of the year so far, which is crazy because
Wow.
that's because we went to so many festivals, and audiences really resonated with it along with critics, and we were able to win all these awards, which was really gratifying in the sense where it just felt like this personal story was resonating on a more universal level with because festivals are all around the country, so it was resonating with
Mm.
audiences everywhere. So we just finished our festival wrap up last week at Doc NYC. And the film is now it's out in the United States. It's playing
Is
in,
it?
in theaters
Okay.
across the country and available on video on demand to rent. So it's really special to think, how this really personal film that just started with me in a camera um, has now found its way into so many festivals and so many accolades and all the Oscar buzz and everything. It's all really exciting. It's all these things I never would have even dreamed would have happened when I first picked up that camera.
And at all these film festivals, I mean, what, 28, 30 film festivals did you say?
I think it's like they're over 30 festivals. Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
I mean, well, what have you been able to catch this year? Have you got any favorite movies of the year, favorite docs or fiction stuff? What have you been
Oh,
watching?
gotcha. I've watched a ton of docs that I really love. This one, it's not out yet, but it's called Sam Now. It's also a very personal film. I think it's with PBS. But I think it won like the Zurich at the Zurich International Film Festival, a fantastic personal family documentary about generational trauma. Um, as far as narrative films, I saw the menu yesterday.
Oh yeah, is that any good? I meant to see that this week
I
actually.
enjoyed it. I actually thoroughly enjoyed it. I think Anya Taylor-Joy is such an amazing actress, and she
I
has
love her.
such great taste in picking good entertaining scripts. No, I really enjoyed the menu actually. I think I actually want to go and watch it again with my wife. There's a larger message in there about the film beyond the food and everything, and
Hmm.
the ending is what made me really like that film. Um, Gosh, trying to think what else I've seen. Um, I've seen
Have
I've seen so I feel like I've seen so many documentaries this year.
have you seen
Uh,
Fire of Love?
I've seen Fire of Love. Like I saw
I
that on the
loved Fire and Love.
I saw it on the big screen, which
Mm-hmm.
you have to see that one in theaters.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
David Bowie, Moon Age Daydream,
Moonshine Dream. Mm-hmm.
that's just an
You're a big Bowie
experience.
fan.
I love David Bowie.
Great.
I remember in an early cut of Bad X, a David Bowie song was actually our
Oh,
end credits.
really?
Yeah.
That was one of my favorite bits of the whole film was you and your dad jamming out with
Yeah,
in there.
yeah.
That's
Oh,
something you guys do much because it appeared a couple times
no,
now.
my dad did not ever really explore his musical side until very, very recently. And before being a filmmaker, I was in a punk rock band, and
Oh,
um,
sweet.
he very much hated how much I wanted to like be a rock star and do music.
Hmm.
Uh, Being able to bring him into my world at the end of the film and show him, this is what I love doing. It was it was a really special moment for me because I think he got to see how much fun making music can be.
Mm, absolutely. I mean, actually, in terms of like your world, your sister announcing her pregnancy with the video to your parents was just so sweet. And did you help her make that?
I did. We
Or
made it all in one day. So she told me first in the morning, that's the one my wife was able to capture when I'm wearing the Schitt's Creek shirt. That
yeah,
says,
yeah.
I had no idea. Um, and we after she told me, we're like, all right, we're gonna film everyone else's. And then she's like, how do we tell my parents? And I'm like, or how do we tell Mike and how do we tell my parents? I'm like, okay, let's make a video of like a video of you and Mike and your whole story together with the pregnancy announcement at the end. So that's what we ended up doing all in one day, and that whole last scene was shot in
Wow.
one day. So,
Oh, dude, that must have been a hectic day. Wow, what an emotionally draining day for the whole family.
but as soon as I shot that, I knew that was the ending of the film, and
Hmm. Yeah.
it became very clear that this was a story of family after I shot that last scene.
Beautiful. I mean, well, thank you so much for being here, David. We have had such a lovely chat, and I wish you all the best with the film. I can't wait for it to come out here so I can push it in everyone's faces because it's one of the best documentaries I've seen in a while. And yeah, I mean, thank you so much for making the film, to be honest. It's been lovely.
Awesome. No, thank you, Luke.